Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the kind of show nobody signs up for, but every kid in a dysfunctional house has seen. Forget Netflix, forget Hulu, forget cable. The biggest drama streaming live every night doesn't cost a dime. It's called parents fighting. You don't need a subscription. You don't need Wi-Fi. You don't even need popcorn. All you need is two adults who swore to love each other, now screaming across the living room like it's an audition for the loudest, angriest soap opera on earth. And the kids, they're the audience, wide-eyed, silent, and stuck in the front row watching the two people they look up to turn into characters in a twisted reality show. Kids don't see therapy, stress, or unresolved issues. They see drama. They see cliffhangers. They see yelling, door slamming, and plot twists that make professional screenwriters jealous. Parents think they're hiding the truth, but kids catch every scene, every line, every punch of sarcasm, and they file it away like reruns of their favorite series. Except it's not just entertainment, it's education, the kind that sticks for life. Welcome to the only show kids never asked for, but one they'll never forget. When parents fight in front of their kids, the scene doesn't play out like a tragic family crisis in the eyes of those children. No, to them it often feels like they've stumbled onto some kind of unscripted reality TV episode that never ends. Imagine being a kid, sitting cross-legged on the couch, bowl of cereal in hand, when mom and dad start going at it. To the child, it's not necessarily trauma at first glance. It's a performance, a free show they didn't have to pay for, with two people they know better than anyone else suddenly turning into actors in a heated drama. The living room becomes a stage, the kitchen becomes a wrestling ring. And every slammed door or sarcastic jab is another scene in the series. That's the weird way kids process things. They don't have the emotional vocabulary to label it as dysfunction. They only know it's loud, it's dramatic, and it sure beats their usual cartoons. Kids will sit there watching wide-eyed, wondering who's going to deliver the best punchline, who's going to cry first, or who's going to storm off in dramatic fashion. They start to recognize patterns like viewers of a sitcom. Oh, here comes the part where mom brings up that thing from last year, or dad's going to walk out and pretend he's not coming back. It becomes a predictable script like reruns, except it's happening in real life, in real time, with real consequences, though the kids don't grasp the weight of it yet. To them, it's a performance of adults acting wild, and the kids are the unwilling audience members who didn't buy tickets but can't leave the theater. The strange thing is that kids can even find humor in the absurdity of it. They might giggle at the way a parent mispronounces something in anger, or the way someone slams a drawer only for it to bounce back open. They see bloopers where the adults see pain. The human brain is funny like that, especially when it's young. Children's minds try to make sense of chaos by reshaping it into something they can handle, and what better way to process chaos than by turning it into entertainment? After all, entertainment is safe. It's just a show. No one really gets hurt in a show, right? That's how they protect themselves from the fear boiling underneath. The living room becomes the Netflix of dysfunction. No subscription needed, no buffering, just raw drama on demand. The kids start categorizing the fights like genres. There's the angry whisper argument that feels like a thriller, where tension builds quietly until something explodes. There's the full-blown shouting match, which is all the flavor of a loud action movie. And then there are the sarcastic exchanges, the passive-aggressive jabs, the sighs and muttered insults that feel more like a dry comedy. To the outside world, this would sound disturbing, but inside that home, kids adapt by making it familiar, by giving it shape. They take on the role of the audience because it's the only way they can survive watching their parents, the people they trust most, fall apart in front of them. What makes it so surreal is how quickly kids can shift from being scared to being entertained, from clutching their blanket tightly to secretly laughing at how ridiculous adults sound when they're mad. They don't yet understand that behind the drama is a broken marriage, unresolved pain, or years of resentment. They only see the surface, the sparks flying, the exaggerated body language, and they register it like slapstick comedy. And once that habit of viewing it as a show takes root, the line between family and performance gets blurry. Parents become characters, fights become episodes, and the home becomes a theater of dysfunction where the audience never leaves, because the audience lives there. Parents love to remind their kids that they're role models, pillars of wisdom, examples to follow. But when they start tearing each other apart in front of those same kids, what exactly are they modeling? They're not teaching lessons about patience, compassion, or problem solving. They're teaching volume control, specifically how to crank it up past maximum. They're teaching how to weaponize words and throw kitchen utensils like they're competing in the Olympics. Children are impressionable, and in the theater of parental conflict, they become apprentices learning the art of bad behavior. They watch closely, not because they want to, but because they can't look away. And in those moments, the blueprint for how to treat other people is silently etched into their minds. When a parent screams insults across the room, a child doesn't just hear noise. They hear the soundtrack of conflict. They start to internalize that when someone disagrees with you, the correct response isn't calm reasoning. It's volume, anger, and maybe a few creative curse words thrown in for good measure. They see eye rolls, slam doors, and cutting sarcasm, and it registers as normal adult interaction. To a child, mom and dad are the first teachers, the first example of how humans connect. So if what they're seeing daily is a battlefield, they start to believe relationships are wars disguised as love stories. What makes it worse is the double standard. Parents constantly scold their kids with lines like, "Don't yell at your brother," or "Use your words, not your fists." But 5 minutes later, those same parents are hurling words like daggers at each other, showing their kids exactly what not to do, except the kids don't hear the not. They only see the action. Children don't learn values from lectures. They learn from observation. So when parents brawl like street fighters, the child thinks, so this is how grown-ups handle problems. And guess what? That child will take the same script and act it out on the playground in friendships and eventually in their own relationships. Every slammed door is a tutorial. Every shouted insult is a lesson plan. Parents don't realize that their kids are studying them the way students study teachers. Except here, the class is called How to Love Like a Lunatic 101. And kids are attentive because they don't just see the actions, they absorb the emotions. They watch how anger takes over, how words can sting deeper than fists, how silence can be used as punishment. These are not abstract concepts to a child. They are vivid demonstrations acted out nightly. And the child learns by mimicry. Even when parents tell themselves the kids are too young to understand, the modeling still works. Kids may not grasp the exact details, but they can read tone, tension, and body language with frightening accuracy. They feel the anger in the air, they notice the snappy comebacks, and they store it away. One day, in the middle of their own argument with a partner, they'll pull out those very same tactics without even realizing they were programmed decades ago. The cycle continues because the modeling never stopped. Parents don't just raise children. They raise the next generation of fighters or peacemakers, depending on what they show. The irony is that many parents would be horrified to hear their kids repeating the same insults back to them, yet those insults are the family vocabulary they've been drilling for years. It's not what they wanted to pass down, but it's what the kids picked up. The kids weren't looking for lessons, but they got them anyway. Broadcast loud and clear every time mom and dad squared off like opponents in a boxing ring. The house becomes less of a home and more of a training camp for how to argue, how to dominate, how to win at all costs. And the child graduates from that camp fluent in dysfunction, ready to take their lessons into the world. The beauty of adult hypocrisy is that it's so blatant and yet delivered with a straight face, as if nobody notices the contradiction. Parents will wag a finger at their kids and say, "Now listen, fighting is wrong. Violence is never the answer. You should always talk things out calmly." The same parents will then, 10 minutes later, be shouting across the kitchen like gladiators in an arena, flinging verbal daggers, sometimes even throwing in a few household objects for special effects. To a kid, this is comedy gold. It's like being told not to eat candy while the adult stuffs their mouth full of chocolate in plain sight. Kids might not have the courage to call it out, but they sure notice it. And that hypocrisy plants confusion in their little brains. Do as I say, not as I do. The mixed messaging becomes part of the family culture. At school, kids get detention for yelling, for shoving, for using aggressive words. Teachers preach about kindness, cooperation, and respect. But at home, the very people who should be backing up those lessons are providing the opposite example. Parents become walking contradictions, delivering noble-sounding speeches about peace while putting on a live demonstration of chaos. Imagine being a kid sitting at the dinner table, told to chew quietly and respect family time, only to witness mom and dad escalating into a dinner time brawl that makes the food fly. The irony is so thick you could butter it on toast. Children are literal creatures. They don't grasp the nuance of context. They don't think, mom and dad are under stress, and this argument is about bills. They just see two people violating the very rules those same people enforce. It's like being told not to lie, then catching your parents telling a bold face one to the neighbors about how everything is fine. Kids are small, but they're not blind. They might not call out the hypocrisy, but it gets filed away in their heads under rules are negotiable or worse. Rules don't apply if you're powerful. That's a dangerous lesson because it means authority figures can bend morality whenever it suits them. And let's not ignore the absurdity of the adult logic. Parents think they're protecting their kids by telling them not to fight, but they're actually giving them the perfect blueprint of how to do it more effectively. A child who hears, "Don't scream at your siblings," but then watches mom scream like a banshee during a fight doesn't learn peace. They learn technique. They learn timing, volume control, dramatic pauses, and the art of bringing up old grievances at the exact right moment to twist the knife. It's practically a masterclass in hypocrisy. The kids become students of contradiction, graduating with honors and double standards. The funniest or saddest part is how adults justify it. They'll say, "Well, it's different when grown-ups fight." No, it's not. To a child, fighting is fighting. There is no adult edition and child edition. The screaming sounds the same. The slamming doors feel the same. The tension in the air smells the same. Kids don't have the mental file folder for This doesn't count because it's adult stress. They only know the raw experience of watching their role models act like the very bullies they're warned about at school. And then the next morning, those same parents expect the kids to go out into the world and be little saints. The disconnect is laughable if it weren't so damaging. So what grows out of this hypocrisy? Kids who can't take authority seriously. Kids who grow up cynical, thinking all rules are fake, all lessons are hollow, and all authority figures are two-faced. When a parent says, be kind, the kid remembers the shouting match. When a parent says, don't bully, the kid remembers the sarcastic takedowns. When a parent says, never hit, the kid remembers the slammed door or the thrown object. The words lose weight because the actions already told the truth. And in a twisted way, the parents aren't lying. The kids are learning. Just not the lesson the parents thought they were teaching. Kids don't learn about relationships from books, from lectures in school, or from the occasional heartwarming cartoon about friendship. They learn it from the live action drama that happens right in front of them every single day, and that stage is usually their own home. Parents are the first couple kids ever watch, the first example of love, commitment, and communication. And here's the kicker: if what the kids see is constant fighting, shouting, and emotional tug of war, they absorb that chaos is the default setting for how relationships are supposed to look. To them, dysfunction doesn't feel dysfunctional. It feels normal because it's all they know. A child watching mom and dad bicker endlessly starts forming a mental script. This is love. The brain concludes,
love is yelling. Love is slamming doors.
love is sarcasm laced with venom. Love is cold silences that last for days. To a kid, those aren't red flags. They're family traditions. They grow up thinking every relationship has to come with fireworks, but not the pretty kind you see on holidays, the kind that blows up in your face. Later in life, when they enter their own relationships, they don't search for calm waters. They gravitate toward storms because that's what feels familiar. Peace feels foreign, even boring compared to the chaos they were raised in. It's a cruel trick the mind plays. Imagine a child who sees parents apologizing, listening, and finding compromises. That child grows up believing love means patience, kindness, and communication. Now take a child who only sees verbal grenades tossed back and forth across the kitchen. That child grows up believing love is war disguised as intimacy. They carry those early impressions like invisible baggage into adulthood, replaying the same scenes they watched as kids, almost word for word, as if relationships came with a pre-written script. It's not that they want to repeat the dysfunction, it's that they don't know another language. And here's where it gets even darker. Kids who grow up in hostile households often confuse intensity with affection. If mom and dad scream, cry, make up, then fight again, the child internalizes the idea that love is supposed to be exhausting, full of highs and lows, breakups and makeups. So when they meet someone later in life who treats them with calm respect, they might think, this doesn't feel right. Something's missing. What's missing is the chaos, the drama, the adrenaline of dysfunction. They don't trust peace because peace was never part of the show they watched growing up. They think they're in the wrong theater when, in fact, they're finally seeing a healthy performance. It doesn't stop at romantic relationships either. Friendships, work relationships, even casual interactions get colored by the lens of family conflict. A child who saw constant brawls at home may assume that conflict is the default mode of human connection. So they might pick fights with friends, overreact at small slights, or sabotage connections because in their minds, relationships that don't explode aren't real. They become experts at drama, skilled at turning minor disagreements into major productions, all because their earliest teachers in love and partnership handed them that blueprint. Parents often underestimate just how much of their behavior becomes a template. They think, oh, the kids aren't paying attention, or they're too young to understand. Wrong. Kids are always paying attention. They're like little sponges with satellite dishes attached, absorbing not just the words, but the tones, the body language, the tension in the air. They see the way one partner rolls their eyes when the other speaks. They notice the dismissive gestures, the cutting remarks, the little digs that pile up over time. And every single one of those details gets logged under the heading, this is how couples treat each other. Years later, when they catch themselves doing the exact same thing, they won't even realize they're echoing the ghosts of their parents' fights. It's almost tragic comedy when you think about it. Parents want their kids to find love, to be happy, to have strong families of their own. Yet many parents are unconsciously handing their kids the tools to build wreckage instead of stability. It's not intentional, but it's inevitable when the daily example is more battlefield than partnership. And here's the most ironic part. Kids who grow up in war zones often end up craving the very thing that hurt them. They look for partners who feel familiar, and familiar often means volatile. They might even feel uncomfortable with someone who doesn't yell back, as if kindness is suspicious and calmness is a red flag. The cycle can last generations. Dysfunction breeds dysfunction until someone breaks the chain, and breaking that chain isn't easy. It requires unlearning the lessons drilled into the psyche during those early years. But before that unlearning can even happen, the child turned adult has to recognize that what they thought was normal wasn't normal at all. That recognition is painful because it forces them to admit that the first people they ever trusted, their parents, taught them how to love in all the wrong ways. And that realization hits harder than any shouted word or slammed door ever could. Parents love to pretend kids are oblivious, as if children are too busy with their toys or too young to grasp what's going on. They'll slam doors, hurl insults, unleash rage, and then whisper to each other later, "Don't worry, the kids didn't notice." Really? The kids sitting 3 feet away didn't notice. The ones with ears sharper than any adult. The ones who can hear a candy wrapper crinkle from across the house. They didn't catch the screaming match in surround sound. That's the absurdity of denial. Parents act like kids are living in some magical bubble of ignorance, when in reality, kids are noticing every sigh, every sarcastic jab, every raised eyebrow. They're not just noticing, they're memorizing it like lines from their favorite series. Think about it from a child's perspective. When the house erupts in another episode of Mom versus Dad, they're not lost in confusion. They're locked in. They're following the storyline. They know the recurring arguments, the familiar comebacks, the way one parent always storms off at the same point. It's like binge, watching a show where you already know the characters and their predictable arcs. Kids don't need a TV remote when their living room is serving up reality drama with commercial-free intensity. Parents convince themselves that the kids are in the dark, but the truth is the kids are the audience that never misses a scene. And here's the twisted part: kids often become commentators on the drama. Not out loud, but in their minds. They keep track of who won, the argument, who had the better comebacks, who played dirty. They notice when someone brings up old grudges like a plot twist from last season, or when someone pulls out the classic line that ends the fight every time. To parents, it's pain and frustration. To kids, it's a script they could recite by heart. And when the fight's over, the parents might think, well, at least it's done. The kids can relax now. But the kids are still replaying the highlights in their heads like they just watched an action-packed episode that left them on a cliffhanger. Denial also has another layer parents convince themselves they're fighting, quietly. You know, those hushed but angry whispers in the bedroom, doors half closed, voices straining to stay low. Kids hear that too. Whispered rage is still rage, and the quieter it gets, the scarier it feels to a child. A slammed door at least signals the fight is out in the open. But a muffled argument behind thin walls becomes a mystery thriller in the child's imagination, often scarier than the loudest brawl. Parents underestimate the radar kids have for emotional tension. Even silence after a fight becomes deafening, a reminder that the episode may be over, but the atmosphere hasn't cleared. What makes the denial so comical is how parents underestimate memory. They assume kids forget instantly, but children's minds are like hard drives. They record every detail and store it. That sarcastic insult mom threw out in frustration, the kid will remember it years later, not just as a line of dialogue, but as evidence of how people who love each other behave. Parents think they're hiding dysfunction when, in fact, they're broadcasting it in high definition straight into their kids' subconscious. It's not just noticed in the moment. It becomes the rerun that plays in their minds for decades. The saddest part is that kids often adapt by normalizing it. If they keep seeing the same fights on repeat, they start to believe this is just what couples do. It doesn't shock them anymore. It entertains them. It conditions them. It shapes their worldview. That's the long-lasting effect of denial. While parents convince themselves the kids aren't watching, the kids are internalizing, rehearsing, and one day repeating. They don't just watch the show. They grow up to star in the sequel. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, what you really see is a tragic sitcom that never needed to exist in the first place. Parents fighting in front of kids isn't just a heated moment between two adults. It's a full-blown performance where the audience never asked for tickets. Kids don't just sit there passively. They absorb, they analyze, they memorize. They start treating the chaos like a Netflix series, complete with reruns, predictable scripts, and cliffhangers. The hypocrisy of adults telling their children not to fight while modeling battlefield behavior only cements the lesson that yelling, door slamming, and venom-laced sarcasm are the language of love. And the damage doesn't vanish when the noise stops. It sticks, shaping how those kids will fight love and live for years to come. The irony is that parents often think kids are too young to notice, too distracted to care, too innocent to understand. But kids see it all. They turn the dysfunction into entertainment because that's easier than admitting it hurts. They laugh when they should cry. They watch when they should feel safe, and they normalize what should never have been normal. That's the real danger, not just the fights themselves, but the fact that they become the blueprint for the next generation's relationships. And unless someone breaks the pattern, the cycle keeps spinning, handing down war where there should have been peace. So maybe the question isn't whether kids notice, but whether adults are brave enough to admit they've been putting on a show that should have been canceled seasons ago. Maybe the real challenge is learning that being a role model isn't about lectures and punishments. It's about showing what love looks like when it's respectful, when it's calm, when it's steady. Because in the end, kids don't need another live drama in their living room. They need parents who teach them by example. That love doesn't have to be a battlefield. Thank you for listening. Good luck in whatever role you play, whether as a parent, a child, or someone just trying to break the cycle. And remember, the audience is always watching.